Today I'm teaching you how to build an easy DIY butcher block countertop that's durable with a polished look and a modern vibe. The strategy for this project is to build the block out of 1x2 boards, then cut it down to size using a custom template, and then finish it off by sanding, staining, and sealing. You don't have to be afraid to tackle this project on your own because you can actually get the wood cut down at Home Depot, and then you'll just need a jigsaw and a sander to give it its final shape for a perfect fit. Before we dive into making this, I first want to talk about the type of wood that I used. So I've seen quite a few people try to do DIY butcher blocks using pine, which, while an inexpensive choice, is not very durable. It's a softwood, so it's going to ding super easily. And unless you're going for something with a really rustic vibe where you're literally distressing it every time you use it, pine's probably not your best option. I'm using red oak for this project. Oak is a hardwood, unlike pine, which is a softwood, and it has this really pretty grain, which I think just adds to the sophisticated look. So I would absolutely recommend using oak for this project or a similar hardwood, because it's going to give you a much better finish. Red oak is a good middle ground because it's not super expensive, but it is going to give your project a more polished, sophisticated look. So I first started by measuring the length of the space that I'm building this custom countertop for, which is my coffee bar. It's a little nook that's not square at all. So I measured the widest point and gave myself a little extra wiggle room of an inch. Once I had that measurement, I cut all my 1x2 boards down to size. I use my miter saw, but you can also have this done in store at Home Depot. Boards on my table and clamped them down to create kind of a right angle L. Now this looks super complicated, but it turned out I really didn't need it to be that square. So I would say to just go ahead and line your boards up as square as possible, but don't worry about that edge being totally straight if your space is like mine and not square at all. So I just applied some wood glue to both sides of the boards and then lined them all up flat. It's important to do this on a space that's level so you can make sure the boards are staying all level. Don't worry if it's not absolutely perfect. You can fix all those areas after with a sander and some 80 grit sandpaper, so get it as straight as you can, but I wouldn't be overly concerned. When you're applying glue, it's better to put too much and have to wipe off the extra than to put not enough and have your project fall apart. Once my pieces were all lined up, I clamped them together using some clamps. You want to clamp them as tight as possible for a good hold, and a good rule of thumb is the more clamps, the better. These are super easy to use. There's a little lever that unlocks, you can just slide the clamp back and forth, and then to fine tune, you pull this trigger and pump it to get it super tight. I actually only had 2 of these, and I would like to have really used 4 or 5 on this project, so I ended up putting one on either side and then running a board across the middle and clamping that down to make sure the middle area stayed flat as well. The glue will probably be dry after about 24 hours, but since we're in Houston with a lot of humidity, I let mine dry a little bit longer just in case. Once the glue was dry, I started sanding the piece down to get it all level, get all those little nooks and crannies perfectly smooth. So I used a random orbit sander and I started out with 80 grit sandpaper, which is super coarse, so that's going to help me shape my project, taking off more material at once so we can get all the boards flat. So a couple quick sanding tips. Number 1, it's best to secure your material to your table using clamps so that it doesn't move around while you're trying to sand. Number 2, make sure to keep the tool level. You want to keep it flat and slowly work across those high spots instead of turning it and digging it into your project. That's going to make all kinds of waves, and you especially don't want that on a countertop because that means there's low spots where water can collect. Keep your tool level and slowly work across any areas that are higher than the rest. After a couple passes of 80 grit sandpaper, I switched to 100 grit and went over my entire countertop a couple more times before switching to 220. So 220 is going to give you that finished feel where everything is super smooth and it looks like one piece of wood. Once you're done sanding, you'll have to trim down your countertop for a perfect fit, and to do that, I made a custom template using poster board. I started with a full-size piece of poster board, and my walls were really wonky and actually super curved, So I ended up using a contour gauge, which is something you can buy in the tile section of your home improvement store. And this helped me measure the curvature of my wall, which was supposed to be straight, but walls are never actually squares. So I did this template one piece at a time, measuring, cutting a piece, and then taping it pieced together kind of like a puzzle so that it fit perfectly. I then used this template to just trace right on the top of my countertop so I know exactly where to cut. I used a jigsaw to make this cut because it's really easy to cut curves and my walls were curved. But if you're cutting an area that's square, a circular saw or table saw might work a lot better. So I first cut on the outside of the line and then checked the fit and went back and took slivers off until the fit was really tight and really perfect. It's better to cut it big at first and then have to take a little extra off than to cut a huge chunk out of your counter and not be able to add that back. So I sanded those cut edges again just to make sure they were smooth, and then it was time to stain and finish. Now I was super indecisive about this process, so I actually flipped the counter over onto the back side and tried like a bajillion different stains on the back to see what I liked best. This is the madness happening right now. So far, the weathered oak down here in this area is doing it for me. So I ended up going with a weathered oak penetrating stain, which I really liked how it pulled down the yellow. It really got into the grain to give the wood some character. So to apply my stain, I just painted it on with a foam brush and then used a dust-free cloth to wipe it off pretty soon after. I didn't really let it sit or soak in because I just wanted it to be kind of light. This is something I tested out on the back, and I knew I liked the stain to be just applied and then wiped off versus letting it sit and get really dark. Once the stain was dry, I applied some polyurethane to seal and give me a little waterproofing. Since this is being used as a coffee bar, drips and spills are more than likely. I actually went with a matte polyurethane because I wanted to preserve that raw wood look. I didn't want it to be overly shiny or glossy. I added some decorative dowels to the front of my countertop. But I love the way it added interest and character to my counter. Once everything was dry, it was finally time to install. I used corner braces on the underside of my built-ins, but you could also use an adhesive like liquid nails or a variety of other countertop installation techniques. So I actually built this butcher block countertop for my coffee bar because I wanted there to be some good contrast between our existing granite countertops. I didn't want to try to have to match those in any way, and I feel like this brought a lot of warmth to the space, plus it's really easy to customize based on what you choose to finish it with. Okay, so are you guys ready to see the finished countertop? Button down below so you can stay in the loop with more fun and fresh projects just like this. So once my pieces were all lined up, I planned